It's 12 noon on January the 22nd, 2025, calling to order the meeting of the City of Las Vegas Historic Preservation Commission for its first regular meeting of 2025. Will the city clerk please call the roll and determine if we have a quorum and identify if any commissioners who are on the telephone. And for the record, please ascertain that members of the commission who are attending the meeting by phone to make sure that they can hear the meeting. As a point of history, in addition, due to the open vacancy on the commission, Nevada state law states, quote, the necessary quorum and number of votes necessary to take action on a matter is reduced, and the quorum number does not include the vacancy. Please call the roll and determine if we have a quorum.
Chair Stodel,
Present.
Vice Chair Laramie, Commissioner Levine,
Here.
Commissioner Hotchkiss,
Here on the phone.
Commissioner Serfas, Commissioner Cosgrove,
Here.
Commissioner Palacios,
Here.
Commissioner Moody,
Here.
Commissioner Perdue,
Here.
Commissioner Grimmer, Commissioner Seabrandt,
Here.
Commissioner Gillespie.
Here.
Thank you. We do have a quorum.
Commissioner Hotchkiss, are you able to hear the meeting?
Yes, sir, I can hear quite well, thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item 2 to the Las Vegas City Clerk's Office. Has this meeting been posted in compliance with the Nevada State Open Meeting Law under revised statute 2241.020?
Yes, it has.
Thank you. Agenda item number 3 is the first public comment period. Comments during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters on the agenda for action. If you wish to be heard, please come forward and give your name for the record. The amount of discussion as well as the amount of time any single speaker is allowed may be limited. Would anybody like to speak at this time? For the record, seeing and hearing none, we'll move to agenda item 4. This is the place on the agenda where the chair makes an announcement that is relative to the legal responsibilities of the Historic Preservation Commission. It is not an action or a discussion item. There's a seminar that's coming up. The National Alliance of Preservation Commissions is launching its new year with an important webinar. It's titled Historic Resource Surveys Unlocking the Foundation of Preservation. It's on Thursday, January the 30th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. Historic resource surveys, which we have done many of at the HPC, are vital for identifying, documenting, and protecting the places that tell our shared stories. This webinar offers a comprehensive exploration of these essential tools. It covers both the foundational principles and the advanced strategies. The webinar will focus on 3 points: the different types of surveys, the key consideration for successful implementation, and how to use the survey results to guide preservation efforts and inform decision-making. According to the posting from the National Alliance, it says, quote, whether you are new to the field or a seasoned preservationist, this session will provide actionable insights to help you approach this historic survey. NAPC hosts webinars nearly every month on timely topics geared toward those working and volunteering in the historic preservation field at the local level. Webinars are free for NPAC members, and the Las Vegas Historic Preservation Commission and its commissions are fully paid members. Here's a copy of a little more of the detail and a link, and I think that if you have any questions, I'm sure Teresa will give us a link. And since this is probably going to be needed for the record, there's a copy. Thanks, Mike. Move on to agenda item number 5. It's an action item. The matter for possible action is the approval of final minutes by reference of the regular meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission on December the 11th, 2024. To the commission, are there any necessary changes, corrections, or amendments to the draft of the minutes of that meeting, December the 11th?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I was unable to attend the December meeting, so I plan to abstain from voting on approval of those minutes.
All right. Seeing no request for any changes, look for a motion to approve the minutes as drafted.
This is Commissioner Cosgrove. I move that we approve the minutes as drafted.
We have a motion. Any further comment from the commission? General public? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Hotchkiss votes aye on the phone.
Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously with the chair voting with those in attendance. Agenda item 6, 25-0004-HPC1. This is an action item regarding approval of the voting process of the Historic Preservation Commission's annual Excellent in Historic Preservation Award. Last year, the commission and the staff began upgrading this decade-old process. As a point of reference, a look back 52 years ago, in 1973, President Richard Nixon signed a joint U.S. Congress resolution creating the first National Historic Preservation Week. In 2003, the Las Vegas City Historic Preservation Commission created a Historic Preservation Award program. The program is now part of the annual celebration of the May 15, 1905 land auction conducted by the San Pedro, Los Angeles, and Salt Lake City Railroad. It is on that day in 1905 that we recognize as the birth of the town of Las Vegas. 6 years later, May of 1911, the town was in a full campaign to become a city. Then on June 1st, 1911, the citizens voted to become an incorporated city and elected its first mayor, Peter Buell, and a city commission. In looking at that, the position of mayor and all the commissions were on the ballot every 2 years, serving only 2 years, and everybody was up, and that was later changed to 4 years and alternating. But let's jump forward to 80 years. In 1992, the city of Las Vegas created the Historic Preservation Commission. Then we'll jump forward another 10 years, and that's when we created the Excellent in Historic Preservation Awards, honoring individuals and organizations that have contributed to preserving the historic architecture and cultural resources of Las Vegas. Working with Dr. Seabrand and Teresa, the commission has updated the process and expanded the award categories, including one for Colleen Beck. Today is the final step, is an action item regarding implementing the updated 22-year-old voting process. Dr. Seabrand?
Thank you, Seabrand, for the record. Excuse me. And so I really don't have much more to add than what Chairman Stodel has already presented, other than the voting process that was part of the backup, as well as on the PowerPoint slide that is in front of you. If this is the way the commission would like to move forward, then we just need a vote that this is the voting process.
But the biggest change here is the fact that we used to vote yes or no at a public meeting regarding this, which was a bit outdated. So the process now, as pointed out here, is the nominations will come in, we'll get a list of the nominations, and then send our votes back to staff, and then an announcement will be made of those. The results may not be substantially different than if we did it all in public, but the key thing here is it will be a private vote, and only staff will see all of the votes. And then secondly, and I think probably more important, is today is the day we need to begin thinking about the various categories and filling these out. At the end of bullet point 2, just to point out, and while it's in parentheses, it still is an important statement. Incomplete nominations will be rejected by the staff, although it doesn't say staff, but that's who would, if they're not done properly and filled out, and you forgot to put the person's name in, it'll be rejected. With that said, are there any questions regarding this particular agenda item? If not, would look for a motion to approve.
I'm happy to make that motion, Mr. Chair. Move to approve item 6.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Hotchkiss votes aye on the phone.
Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously with the chair voting in favor. Agenda item 7, 25-005, HPC 1, discussion for possible action regarding approval of $736 for the production of a bronze plaque for the historically listed Huntridge House 2, located at 1433 Cottonwood Place. Dr. Seabrand?
Thank you, Seabrand, for the record. And of course, this example in front of you is just that, is what it will look like. This house was approved to be on the historic register by the HPC Planning Commission and also by City Council. And as we add properties to our register, we do provide the bronze plaque to be placed and installed on the outside of the property. And we just need the commission's approval to spend the HPC money to order that plaque. And it usually takes between 6 to 8 weeks.
Questions? There's a one line that I was looking for the answer to, and you have that in there, and that's the second line from the bottom. The property owner has agreed to mount the plaque on the exterior of the properties. Are there any particular guidelines we give? Are these put on the house or the fence, or is there anything we tell them that?
It just has to be visible to the general public from the public right-of-way, so
Okay.
that if somebody's walking down the street and they see the plaque and they say, oh, that house is on the register.
Yeah, on the exterior, great. All right. Further questions? If not, would look for a motion to approve.
Jack Levine, for the record, I move to approve.
Further discussion? General public? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Hotchkiss votes aye on the phone.
Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously with the chair voting in favor. Agenda item number 8, 25-006-HPC1. This is a discussion regarding conservation districts as they relate to historic preservation initiatives within the city of Las Vegas. One of the formal and stated official duties and responsibilities of the Historic Preservation Commission is to recommend to the Las Vegas City Council changes in the zoning code, building code, regulations, and other local ordinances that will enhance the process of the Unified Development Code of the City of Las Vegas. With that in mind, the Commission is looking at adding the opportunities provided by the conservation districts to the city code. Currently, that code does not include neighborhood conservation districts, which are neighborhoods that tend to not fulfill the qualifications of a historic neighborhood, yet due to their distinctive character and importance as being a viable contributing area to the community, conservation districts are created. This morning, Commissioner Commissioner Laramie indicated that she, because of a last-minute conflict, was not able to attend today's meeting. She is very interested in this particular topic, and she is hoping that we can go ahead with a presentation today, but to obey this meeting until our February 26th meeting, I believe it is. But with that, one of the ways the city is addressing this particular issue in a slightly different way, in a different way than conservation districts, but with potentially similar results, is through what's a guidebook for building in the historic West Side. Dr. Seabrand, I'm going to let you kind of take that and then introduce our guest.
Okay, thank you, Seabrand, for the record. So yes, as this discussion has been going on over, I guess, the years, as we were talking, as we have also this project that was funded by the Centennial Commission to do the guideline or a guidebook for the historic West Side, that it may address some of the questions or concerns of being in a district that's not considered historic. And Mike Howell, our planning manager, is going to just give a brief update on the work he's been doing with the architects that are working on that project.
Welcome.
Good afternoon. For the record, Michael Howe, Planning Project Manager with the Department of Community Development. And I'm going to start pretty much in response to the issue of Conservation District. I will talk about the Historic West Side Design Guidebook, but not go into too much detail on the guidebook itself. I would like to perhaps present that as a more specific item in the future, because it's still in a draft stage and there's stuff I haven't vetted through to present publicly yet. So with that said, this response is based on the start of what is the issue or the problem that a conservation district's trying to solve. And from my understanding is, in the typical historic neighborhood district process, we start with a survey, we go through the work, we have some outreach, we talk to the neighbors, and we've pretty much established there's an area we think that may qualify for historic district status, but in some cases, maybe that doesn't come to fruition. Through the survey, we may identify some properties, some individual properties that would qualify as a historic building, but the district itself, maybe it doesn't qualify. In this particular case, with specifically the Historic West Side District, because we've had a form-based code rezoning effort, and we've had with our downtown master plan some other efforts going through to preserve the identity of the Historic West Side District, we were able to launch off from the North Wind's intensive survey of African American resources for the Historic West Side. We took that as a starting point. It's a very thorough, in-depth review of the Historic West Side. It identified a handful of properties that would qualify as historic properties, but overall, because of the status and the state of the district, there's a lot of undevelopment. If you're familiar with the West Side, there's lots of vacant developments. So that presented us the challenge of, well, what do we do for future development? As it comes in, we don't want to lose the identity of the West Side. That's what makes it unique. So at that point, shortly after the Northwind survey was completed, we began working with Central Development, or Central Consulting, the planning team with Neighborhood Services and Economic and Urban Development. And the city team basically began looking at, we have the zoning code, but do we have guidelines? Do we have something that gets a little more specific with what are we looking for the Historic West Side that fits in this community that wouldn't necessarily fit anywhere else in Las Vegas? Or more specifically, how do we prevent outside items popping up, new development that really looks like it's maybe Summerlin supportive or something of a different community that isn't unique to the West Side? So with that, we started with a Las Vegas Centennial Commission grant request. That was in September of 23, and we had a $209,000 grant awarded to our partners, KME Architects, Chattel Incorporated, and Sumnu Marketing, and as a partner of that sub-team, UNLV Department of History with Clay T. White. And the strategy was, it is a guidebook, so not a compulsory requirement, a really informative document that says of going through this research, going through the historic photos, going through oral surveys, or oral history surveys that Clay 2 is performing, what do we want to see future development look like in the Historic West Side? And so we started putting that together graphically. We found a period of time from 1940s to 60s, pretty much as the heyday. You always try to be cautious. That doesn't mean that the Historic West Side stopped existing, post-1960s. But that was a period of time that was very unique, and you can still find the remnant properties that are exhibiting masonry and window details and a lot of architectural finishes that were important enough to denote. And that's what the guidebook really starts to do, is zoom in and focus on what's unique about the West Side, a lot of mid-century modern CMU concrete block architectural details, and just make it very simple for someone that's coming and being a mom and pop, a private property owner who wants to build a house, or even a commercial developer, to have a good starting point of, well, what is the community really looking for? How do we graphically document that? And so that's where we've gone through 3 neighborhood meetings. We've gone through the process. We do have a draft of that guidebook. And it's an informative guidebook that I'll say it's hopeful at best. And I say that as an optimist, so that someone can see when they want to take advantage of that development opportunity in a community that has a very strong cultural history, my project's going to fit, it's going to have a good starting point, it'll have support. And so that's kind of how we want the guidebook to work. Again, it's not compulsory. Someone can open it up, they can look at it and say, I choose not to do this. They have that right. It's my job to fight and argue and say, well, hear me out, hold on. If it's an issue of price, if it's an issue of this, because we want you to put a development that's welcomed by the community. We're using the guidebook kind of as that launching point of, well, this is really what we best think fits. And we've done a lot of work, not just in Mike likes decorative concrete block or Diane likes certain types of trees. We went through oral histories, went through historic photos. When we say decorative block, we are taking photos from 1960s, entrances of prominent businesses that may be not there, and say, this is what we're looking for, physical photos and evidence of the site to just say, this is what the west side should look like. So that's how that guidebook process has been put together for the west side. We have that opportunity. Again, we can do it with the Arts District, parts of East Las Vegas, really areas that we've established. I would argue the first requirement, the first footing is having that survey, the intensive historic survey of an area. If we get that, that gives us the crucial information to feed back into the guidelines so that we're not just guessing at what something should look like. We're really trying to make that argument that this is rooted in this point of time and we can prove it and it's documented. Now, the challenge is guidebooks, guidelines, it is an architectural product, so it does have a cost. As we go into some communities that may have had the survey done and they aren't likely to get it qualified for a historic preservation district, we can do a guideline process, but we would have to work with them on how to get that funding through either grant requests, in-kind donations. It would be something that we'd want to be aware of, is that there's a cost to guidelines. Just because they don't apply or they're not mandatory doesn't mean a lot of work doesn't go into them, and it's a lot of professional work. So something to be mindful of as we look to communities like Biltmore or Huntridge, we could do those, and we know we have a lot of that research and that work available. We can work with the community to put together a guidebook, and again, kind of an informative document, something that just fills in the question of, well, I want to do something nice, but I don't, like, what should it look like? Well, here's a book. There's 10 examples. And that's really kind of the strength and the launching point of the guidebook strategy. So with that, I think this will be an ongoing conversation, but I'll stop there and take questions.
First of all, thank you for that very detailed overview. A lot of details that are in there. It sounds in some ways that the goals are also the goals of historic districts and even the conservation district. It's some way to protect the historic integrity of the area. They're not exactly the same, but it seems that the end state is to protect the culture or preserve the culture of the community. Questions or comments? A couple, 3 or 4 things you went off on, and I'll just ask you quickly. The Arts District, is 18B still the Arts District, or has the Arts District been formally expanded?
It is being, today, currently the answer is the 18B is the same boundaries. It is under, I would say, review with the intent of expanding the boundaries, but we would still have to go through a whole neighborhood process of the rezoning and what that looks like. But it would be, I would say, for the record, a substantial expansion. So the current 18B district boundaries are around 84 acres. I think with the proposed expansion, we're looking around 240 acres.
But if I'm writing a report today, I use the map that says 18B, not the proposed map that goes to gas, that goes to commerce, et cetera.
Correct. And the challenge is, and why we're pursuing that expansion, you want to be careful that the 18B is the city map, because there's additional maps out there. I think the community thinks that the 18B Arts District is substantially larger than it actually is.
Yeah.
And so you'll see signage, you'll see cues that says Arts District, but it might be 2 or 3 blocks outside of the Arts District.
Okay. Would you, as a forecaster, would you expect that to be done by June, the expansion, legally, maybe that's not the right word, formally?
I would anticipate, I would hope by, well, I'll say summer of this year. Summer of this year, so June,
Okay.
July, August.
Okay.
That's our target date.
And you also mentioned that with the west side, don't want it to look like Summerlin. Of course, there's a lot of Summerlin that's there, but are the lot sizes substantially different in the McWilliams, the town side? Are those lots sizes still there? And but be more important, do you have a defined map of what, quote, historic West Side is that the guidebook would fall into?
So we do, and what follows the boundaries of what the Historic West Side District is that was set by the Downtown Vision 2045 map.
Ah, okay.
So, because it's a little bit challenging, because you have a larger West Las Vegas master plan area that's considerably larger than what we call the Historic West Side, which is that core area built off of McWilliams, but then also includes land going up to Jackson Avenue to Owens.
Okay.
And just to a point to that, one of the important things, and one of the things I've really been drawn to West Las Vegas, Historic West Side, when you mention the lot size, that is a very important key component, because those are railroad mapped lots. They're the 25-foot width lot,
Not
and they're
railroad
typically
maps.
50 to Wharton. Yeah.
The railroad didn't plot it out. That was,
No, it was McWilliams preceding
right.
Clark's. But it's a typical American platting to follow an alley.
Gotcha.
So it's that 140-foot wide, or 140-foot deep by 25. Typically, people buy the adjacent lots.
Gotcha.
But it's a very walkable American pattern that we only have here in downtown and Historic West Side.
Oh, okay.
So you'll see that 300-foot by 400-foot, or in the west side, even better, a 300-foot by 300-foot block size, which makes it very walkable. It's really hard to repeat. That's something you don't do today, which we really wish we would. And so that's something that's kind of been important with the west side, is like, these are real opportunities. You don't want to lose these.
That's great.
And it keeps it unique.
One, just as a point of reference, McWilliams adopted the railroad's size of streets, and within the railroad there was considerable discussion for the 6 months, and when the site was picked for what is now downtown Las Vegas, that was picked in September of 1904 when Senator Clark came out and said, put it there. At that point, a plat was made, but there was an argument over the width of the streets, and they finally settled on what is a map. And it's interesting that McWilliams adopted that for his lots as well, which is so. There's a lot. Where would somebody go to find the map of the historic west side that you're using?
So those, we pull from the county records. So all
No,
recorded
but I mean,
maps.
is there a map on the design?
Oh, yes, so there's a basis. That map is in the design guidebook, but it's also, if you go online, it follows the boundaries of the Historic West Side District.
Okay, great. Further questions, comments? Please.
Jack Levine for the record. Previous conversations we've had were, I didn't realize that the whole West Side thing or this guidebook was moved into it. Some of the discussions I had with Michelle, just privately at lunch and whatever, was just kind of a historic district light is what we were coming up with, which was an idea that we could put an idea into the population's brain that this is an important district. We haven't gotten there yet as far as making it an historic district, but we could give it a designation. And I don't know that we were even talking about going through surveys and everything to get that started. It was almost kind of like a proof you're it, kind of a designation that we could grant to the Humridge, for example. Say, we'd love this to be an historic district, but it doesn't really qualify under those guidelines, but it's important to us, it should be important to you. We'd like to designate this as a conservation area as opposed to an historic district, and just literally grant it as such. Is that still possible, or does this require the survey and the meetings and the everything to get to as if we were aiming for the higher historic district?
Yeah, I would recommend you'd always have the basis of a survey to start with, because you want to avoid people assuming their neighborhood's old, so it should be historic. We'll just do this conservation alternative. Because one of the things we want to avoid is confusing when a neighborhood goes through the effort and they are a historic district, they should be kind of awarded the status. And what comes with that is the benefits. I mean, they're now zoned historic and they qualify for certain grant programs. Through the conservation alternative, we'll just call it the other than historic district, but preservation minded. There's tools and pathways. The challenge that I'm trying to avoid is if you have an established older neighborhood that's very interested in preserving, but they're not established with any kind of CC&Rs or formal agreements among neighbors. When you have design guidelines for those areas, they're typically, guidelines are compelled with plan developments and they'll have a review committee. So it has like a little bureaucratic form of it. It gets real tricky to have an established neighborhood to then say, well, you're now subject to this guideline and this review process because there's nothing that can really compel them to agree to it. If they can agree to that level of detail, they're pretty much more than likely going to agree to doing the historic district. So there's, hopefully my complicated answer will explain that it gets complicated.
Okay.
No, I think that's clear. What's the goal that you would like to be able to say, here it is?
Well, I would anticipate with the historic West Side Design Guidebook, we'll have we'll call the second final draft in February. We'll have some outreach. I would anticipate, I would hope by April, May, sometime in that point. Also, it being a Centennial Grant funded project, they have a report. So when they are, and I say we are completed, we will have a report that does go into the commission agenda.
Okay, but in the next 90, 120 days?
I believe so. I mean, the document's substantially complete. It's about 85% complete. We're just going through, with typos and making recommendations to the graphics.
It's exciting, Mike. The last question I have, where in the process, once it's to be done, once it's finished, that I've just bought some property in West Las Vegas on Jackson, and I want to put in a 50-story building. How will this design guideline book get into my filter to where is it, will this be required reading? You have to read this before we're going to give you a building permit, or how will I know that this exists?
Yeah, so the guidebook being a city document, it'll be available online through our planning department. And I know that's the typical response, which means it may be buried online.
Yeah.
What's unique about this document, it is basically embodied into our form-based code. So anytime someone comes in for new development, we meet with them and go through this step-by-step process. If we don't meet with them and they try to pull permits, as you're supposed to do, we will still, at that point, catch them at the permit review and say, hey, have you seen this guidebook?
Okay.
So with the West Side, there's a lot of unique safety valves, like points where we can get and have an interaction and say, hey, here's a document we have. And we can do that with a lot of the downtown districts, because that's how it's set up. It is something I'd be mindful of as we get into some of the outer communities. If we're to do something similar like this with the Huntridge, we'd have to make sure we had some kind of formal process to catch, hopefully people getting the permits pulled first, and then having them aware, well, here's a guidebook, it's informative, but, take a look at it.
Well, yeah, the reason I asked that, we have currently 5 historic districts, and a 6th one, the old Railroad Cottage District, which is kind of gone to, there's still, I think, 3 railroad cottages there, but most of the ones that have survived have gone to the state, or to the Springs Preserve, and I think there's one out in Boulder and Henderson at the County Museum. But for the historic existing districts, for anybody that wants to build something within that, is the design guidelines, say for Beverly Green or for the John S. Park, do they see that? Is there a button that they have to press that they have read that, or before they get a building permit?
So, not a button. It is available. It is mentioned, and so if we catch it, if let's say they're in John S. Park or Beverly Green, and that is a historic property, so by code, it's required that they comply with the guidelines. If they don't catch it, if it If they don't catch it, we catch it in the review, and then we meet with them and go
Okay.
through us anyways.
Okay, great.
It'd be nice if we could, like, the minute they got on the computer and hit a permit, like, hey,
Right.
look at this first.
Can we get
I'd like
that-
to catch them at permits first.
Right.
That's, to me, the greater crisis is, would you pull your permits, please?
Yeah, okay. All right, further comments, question? This is a report, but at the request of Commissioner Laramie, would like to obey this until our February 22nd meeting. Would look for a motion to obey, 26th?
We'll move to obey to the 26th.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Hotchkiss votes aye on the phone.
Those opposed? Motion carries with the chair voting in favor. Thank you. Mike, thank you, and look forward to an update when it's available, potentially the next meeting. Thank you. Agenda item number 9, report by the Community Development Department. Updates, Community Development Director Seth Floyd. Director Floyd, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for having a quick and efficient meeting, because that almost made me late for this report, but I made it just in time, so thank you for that. I do have one update. I wanted to report out to you all, and a serious thank you for all of you, and many of you did, who responded to our survey that Teresa sent out, I believe, at the end of last year. One of the things, and I don't remember if I put this on the record, or I told Centennial Commission because we did a similar survey for them as well, but we are looking in calendar year 2025, we are focusing on the service and support that we provide to the boards that community development represents. That's something that we're going to be focusing on. And obviously, this board and Centennial Commission are two of our important boards that we provide staff support to. Part of that is understanding what you want from us, because obviously each board is unique. You're unique in what authority you have, what needs you have, your levels of experience, and so I appreciate you responding to the feedback. So I wanted to just summarize quickly what we heard and maybe talk a little bit about some things that we are going to explore doing over the next year. So one of the things we heard, and I'm not surprised by this one, is a reminder of what the commission's responsibilities specifically are. And this comes up a lot because obviously you're defined by Title 19. There is a section of our code that defines what you do. It's lengthy and it's a little complicated. And there's some lists of what you do that aren't a model of clarity. And that's not a knock on the city attorney's office, Paul. I'm just saying. And you have a catch-all that gives you some broad authority as well. So that's something we can prepare for an upcoming meeting, is to kind of give a little refresher on what your roles and responsibilities are, and maybe some things that are in there that you weren't aware of because we don't do them that often, but just to remind you of what your role is. The other one, and this is one we're going to have to work internally to see how we can do it, and this comes up on all the boards we represent, or at least the ones that I have worked with. More time to read the backup materials, especially when you have items on your agenda. Sometimes that backup gets pretty lengthy, or if we have a report and we're submitting some backup. The challenge there is that we have to prepare it. It has to go to the clerk's office, so we're going to work on how we can try to get you that. I believe now you have access to it about 7 days before the meeting because the agendas post the week prior. We're going to try to see if there's anything we can do to give you a few more days to review those materials, because I think some of you were feeling like you didn't have enough time to get through all the materials. And by the way, also the reports, when you have reports on the National Register designations, for example, those are pretty lengthy and detailed. It takes a little while for you all to review those. There was a request for some tours of the historic areas twice a year. I definitely think that's something that we can coordinate. It's not something we've done, at least not on a schedule in the past, but I think that's an interesting idea, and certainly you all as the stewards of our historic resources, we should set up some times for us to go and view those, or even if we don't go view them, at least report on them from time to time, what's going on in those neighborhoods, any updates or changes, we can certainly do that. And then I believe there was a question specifically asking if you wanted workshops. I think the general consensus was no, but if you have reports that are germane to what we do, we would like those, and those could take sort of a workshop format. So I don't, based on that feedback, I don't anticipate us putting together anything officially called a workshop, but as part of future agendas, you can certainly ask, just like with conservation districts, what Mike just went over, we can provide reports on topics of interest. And I know Diane always does her report after the historic preservation conferences that you all and she attend as well, and those kind of take a report workshop format. So that was a summary of the feedback that we got. I'll take, if you have any more right now, we'll take it, but I really appreciate you all taking the time to respond, because I think that will help us help you for the rest of this year and beyond.
Question? Thoughts? Jack?
This is a question. Is there any way for us to move back into the clerk's office for the more intimate, smaller,
Oh,
look at each other in the face type of a meeting as opposed to this?
I don't know.
Did Diane make you ask that question?
I know, but I like being able to see people.
Yeah, so the short answer is no, but I may have some good news on that front. We're not moving back to the clerk's office for a couple reasons. One, and this board in particular, when you have items where there are a number of folks coming in, Centennial Commission is the same way, that room does actually get pretty tight. And so we want to make sure we give everybody access to the room. The other is that room is not set up with the same level of technology that this room is set up with, and I think we provide a better service to the public by having you in here. We already have all the technology available. But there is I'm looking back at my boss, Steve Ford, because he is over our facilities, but there is a smaller chambers that is being built in the new building next door. I don't know who is going to be going over there, but if that becomes available, there is a chambers that I think will feel more appropriately sized for this commission than the large, 500-seat council chambers. So that may be something that comes available, but even then, all the technology we have, and we're upgrading this room, by the way, so all of our latest technology is in here, and so it's a much easier on the back end admin side, it's much easier for us to utilize this space because it's already set up for city council. So short answer is no, but that's the longer answer, that we might have some opportunities in the future to go to a smaller room.
All right, thank you.
Seth, a couple other points. One is that this is not a guidebook. We are required to do certain things, and that requirement starts at the state level under the NRS. And it would be great if somebody could review the specifics that are of boards and commissions. I think we do that with the initial agenda items, if this meeting was properly posted, but there are other things that are required, and I think there's some confusion over that would occur with tours. There's no problem with going on tours. The problem is if the members start discussing issues and deciding things while they're walking around. I mean, we can walk around and take a look at the 100 as a group. We just cannot make some decisions that are out there or things that would be agendized. So I think some clarity on that, not only for the board, but for the city, to get some clarity on the tours, because I think that, whoever said that, is a good idea. We have two other things, of course, the ordinance, which guides us 19, and we also have our bylaws, and there are some opportunities, as Diane and I spoke about, last time they were updated was 2013. And they match directly with the ordinance, but there are a couple of other words and so forth that should be. So those are the three things that that would be helpful. The other one, the 7 days, if that wasn't the top number on the, hopefully there's some improvement list, it's sure the one I get the feedback on. And a couple of members said, well, we can solve that. And we get it 7 days before it's on the agenda, and we obey it for 30 days. And that gives us 30 days to read it. I wish it was that simple, because the department has some deadlines to meet, and they're not always our deadlines. But I've also read those deadlines, and there are plenty of ways to move around them. So I think, especially if we get a couple of surveys and a nomination, and there's, one time we had close to 800 pages. It's just not, it doesn't work. So I'm glad that
Yeah.
you're going to see if we can address that. Well, that's great.
Yeah, we're going to take a look, just on that point, so, yeah, there are, as you mentioned, there are open meeting law deadlines that we have to meet, and those, I would call those the minimums. I mean, that's the bare minimum amount of notice we have to provide. What we're going to look at is, are there ways that we can give you more notice than that? Now, I will just tell you, one of my concerns that I've raised with Diane that we have to resolve is, once we send it to you, I have to be sure that whatever gets then sent to the clerk's office on their deadline is exactly the same, or if it changes, I send you the update. So there's the correctness of the information that I want to make sure we get resolved. I think we can resolve it, but that's my only concern with sending stuff out too early, is that if it's not complete yet.
So
or
let
we
me
haven't-
take an example. One would be a nomination for a historic property. It's gone through the draft. We've had some changes. Now it's the second draft, and that comes to Diane. Why not, the minute the second draft gets to Diane, is it not sent out? We're not going to make any changes until the meeting. And your staff is not going to make any changes in that. So I would look at, I don't think your staff makes any changes. I don't think you make any changes in any nomination or.
Yes, I review them, and I do give my input to the consultant, absolutely.
Right, but you don't make a change in the document. Those changes are made that are here.
Correct. So the way it would work is when the consultant sends me the drafts, I review them
Right.
and note any changes that are required or edits that are required, but it's sent to the commission the same way that the consultant sent it to me.
Right.
So at the end, after the commission comments on any required edits, the consultant compiles what myself and the rest of the commission has given to them.
Yeah, I just, you know where I was going with that. That
Yeah,
is the-
and I think we're going to be able, at least on some items,
Right.
especially those longer ones, to get you something
Great.
before the 7 days. Like I said, there's just some logistics that we have to sort out. I don't want to promise exactly what it's going to be, but we heard the feedback, and we're going to actively look and see if we can
Well, we
resolve
won't
that.
promise not to obey.
I appreciate that.
Any other questions, comments? Great. Seth, thank you very much. Move on to agenda item 10, report by the Community Development Department regarding the Historic Preservation Commission project update list. Dr. Seaman?
Seabrant for the record, and before I forget, because every time Teresa gives me a note, I forget to update you, so this time I remembered because I wrote it down in big letters. Teresa did send everybody the webinar link, and so on that webinar link for the National Alliance there'll be a code within there that says when you go to checkout, you need to put that code in there, and I don't know what it is. It's in the email. But it's going to ask you to sign up, and you have to put in your name, and it's going to ask you, do you have a membership? Yes, you do, for an organization, and that organization is the City of Las Vegas Historic Preservation Commission. So make sure when you sign up, you use that information, and then you can be able to watch it. And we don't know why you're not getting these emails, because we've provided everybody's emails when you sign up for all of these, the classes or the conferences that we go to. Everybody should be getting those emails, but it seems like you're not, so we're going to check into that. I'm not sure what's happening with that. So with that being said, I do have a guest speaker with me today, but I'm going to go over some real quick updates before I introduce him. And so these are our projects that are in progress. So the Cliff May Home Survey, SHPO is still looking at concurrence for that one. They should have it done by the end of this month. The Old Mormon Fort, the SHPO has reviewed their, they have done the review. That review has been given back to the consultant, and it's just real minor changes. There's still no consensus on the use of the terminology for identifying members of the Church of Latter-day Saints, because we got some comments from SHPO, from the National Park Service on what names to use. So that is not settled yet. So we're trying to get a consensus of what terminology I guess the church it feels is most appropriate. So thank you, Commissioner Moody, for your input. But we did get some opposite input from that as well. So that's still being worked out. So for this one, though, we will get this on the next meeting for our February 26th meeting, as far as doing, having the commission do their final review. But be advised that because the SHPO due date to get this to their staff to put it on the March State Board meeting, well, we're going to miss that, so it won't go on until the June State Board meeting. And that's just...
I didn't quite follow the sequence of events. SHPO has got it and is making some changes.
No, SHPO's done their review.
And they're now sending it to the State Board.
No. It's back with our consultant, with Katz Environmental. So they are making the changes, checking on the terminology. Once those changes are made, she will send that final one back to me, and then that will go to this board. The problem is, and it's not really a problem, it's just how quickly we want it to be reviewed by the National Park Service, is we are going, because our meeting date is after the due date to get the final to SHPO to be put on the March State Board meeting. Is that clear?
Yeah, but it sounds like it's going to come back to this board.
Well, you have to do the final, you have to approve the final, correct? Because this is the final.
That's what I thought. It's two finals.
Oh, yes,
Yeah, we
it's
already
two
have the
finals.
final, which we sent up there. Now SHPO is making some changes that are a little bit more than just dotting some i's and crossing some t's. If they're changing something as important as the name of the church and how it's designated, that should, because that was a significant change that we made here and updated it and clarified that. And I'm surprised, and we'll be interested to see how they want to change that. The challenge is we're talking about something that occurred in 1855, and I don't know who's, anyway, so it will come back to us at our February meeting?
Correct.
Oh, great, okay, that's
Yes.
perfect, thank you.
And unless you don't want to see it, then we can get it over to the State Board.
Mr. Moody?
Yeah, Commissioner Moody, I just want to offer one point of clarification, because a month or two after our initial vote, when we had a pretty robust discussion about the name of the church, someone who did not attend our meeting thought that I was advocating for a change in the name of the old Mormon fort, and I did not do that. So I just wanted to put that out there and on the record. My only changes were when referring to members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that the preference is no longer to be called Mormons.
Thank you. Yes, no, that was so noted. We didn't think that, but thank you.
I would prefer that the name be changed, because it was a Mormon fort for 2 years, and it was Helen Stewart's ranch for 20 years, but that's a whole different topic that we're not
You
going
need to
down
talk
that
to the
path.
National Park Service for that.
Right, okay.
We didn't name it, the Park Service did.
Gotcha.
Okay, so West Side School, the update for the National Register, that will be on the March 25th Museums and History Board meeting. The Floydland Park Historical Report is in progress. We did just vote on the plaque for the 1433 Cottonwood Place. Again, it takes 6 to 8 weeks, and then I need to coordinate with Ward 3 as well as the homeowner, as when we'll do the presentation. We'll, of course, give everybody enough notice if you wish to attend that. The Huntridge neighborhood signs, we're still waiting for some of the installation equipment to put those up. And then the LULAC Multi-Purpose Senior Center, it was added to the National Register, and that was as a result of our Rafael Rivera survey. So, the next thing I want to do is introduce our guest, who's I'm gonna give just a brief update on this, and he's gonna answer questions. Christopher Fobbs, I hope I pronounced your last name, Fobbs. He is a board member with the Nevada Preservation Foundation. He's also a realtor. And we have had this discussion over the years, again, with how do we, and this kind of goes along with what Mike was saying about permits, and making sure that we have given the citizens enough information to make informed decisions on what needs to be done. And one of the hurdles we have is houses in our historic districts that are sold without divulging the information to the homeowner that they live in a historic district, and that comes with specific ordinances and codes. And so Nevada Preservation Foundation got me in touch with Christopher, and he has been doing some amazing work on multiple listing service, is that what it's called? As far as how, and it's not just for Las Vegas, but we'll focus on Las Vegas, but do it statewide, is when somebody is selling a house in a historic district, that is noted in the listing, so the realtor, the seller, the buyer are all informed of that, so they do know that if I buy this house in this district, then it does come with certain regulations on top of whatever the normal codes are for the city. And they've done links and maps. It's a work in progress, but Christopher, if you want to introduce yourself and then explain what's going on.
Sure. Christopher Fobbs, Nevada Preservation Foundation, and I also serve on the board of the Las Vegas Realtors Multiple Listing Service. So this issue was brought to our attention, so we jumped on a call in December, and I presented it to the board meeting in January of MLS. It was unanimous support for getting this, so we're doing a multiple step situation. First, we just wanted to get the link up there, so we basically, on our MLS, when you log in as an agent, we have a bunch of links to maps, zip code maps and that like that, so we've now had a map to historic neighborhoods, and this PDF that you guys has now been uploaded on there, and we're looking to add Boulder City because I know they have a designated map and some information. So that's the first thing, is the information, and all agents, when they logged in last week, got a pop-up that said, hey, there's now links to this new, I don't know if you have slides of those.
No, I don't.
Okay, yeah. There's now links in 2 different places for this PDF, and look there first. And then our step number 2 is we're working with CoreLogic, who is our MLS provider, to get the technical specs on what we would need to put in an overlay map for John S. Park and Beverly Green, so that if someone goes to enter a listing in there, it will say, hey, this is in a historic district, and it will fill that out so that when that gets transmitted on the detail sheets that we all get as agents and we send to our clients and appears on all the websites, that there'll be a field that will say historic designation. And then we have an education portion, obviously, because we have lots of colloquial historic McNeil that are not really so differentiating that, hey, there's actually some neighborhoods that have guidelines and design, guidelines. So we're working on this. We're thinking in January, February, Diana's offered to come do a class at Las Vegas Realtors. So we'll do one then, and we also plan we'll do another class for our Home and History weekend in May. And then, like I said, step 2, we're working, if we get what's called a shape file, we can then get over that to our MLS, and they'll put that as an overlay map when you're entering a new information. And something I said, maybe we can work with different jurisdictions, like step number 4 is maybe we can get, are you in a historically designated neighborhood, as a question on our seller's real property disclosure. So that's something they'll have to go through the real estate division and get added, because that's a state form. But they've added things like the conservation easement if you turn your grass, so there's lots of things on there that may be something ask that question, a realtor will be, hey, are you in this? And we check yes or no, and then the buyers and sellers know what's going on. So that's kind of where we are.
Diane, Dr. Seabrand, and the Nevada Preservation Foundation, to me, this is a big step. I mean, this is an important change. I think you've been working on it for a good portion of time to get through, and it seems to me it also helps the realtors as well.
Yeah, our board was unanimous. They're like, this is great information. Actually, we had some of the flyers, and they all took them, and they're like, I'm going to go back to my office and have a meeting about this, and we can target. We kind of know who sells in those neighborhoods, so we could do a second where we kind of target the agents who buy and sell in those neighborhoods.
Well, I know this was not a very thick agenda item, but this is, to me, stands out as a really major accomplishment, so thank you for that. Will one of the links be to the actual guideline for those neighborhoods?
It links to this Realtor guide for selling in the Las Vegas Historic District that the city has produced.
We can also give them the guidelines for
The
that. if that's
specific
something they
guideline
could
for
add.
Beverly Green and 1-4, great.
Yeah.
Jack?
Yeah, when I first brought this up as an idea 5 years ago, I'm really happy to see we finally got something accomplished with it. I'm real happy to see it pop up on my MLS. We did put in a place where Diane was being noticed of sales from the recorder's office in the historic district. But I think we as the MLS could actually set up a search like we would for a buyer that actually notifies a new listing that, Diane gets an email like I do that says there's a new district and there's a new listing in Dominus Park. We could set that up easily, but in our own MLSs or, within the MLS committee.
Yeah.
That we would be notified that maybe the first letter with the guidelines should go to, or the first contact with the listing agent and the automatic email, the reminder that this is in the historic district. All right from, day one or two on the MLS.
Yeah, that's a
Once
great idea.
if we can get those overlay ones that then trigger, because we don't want to trust, no offense, the realtors themselves to self-select if it's in the neighborhood or not. Because we already see, like with Summerlin, people just for marketing purposes, oh, I want to say I'm in Summerlin when they're not. So that's why we want to get the map. So the source is the MLS, and it says, hey, you're in this map zone. Did you know you're in a historic district? And that may be, so once we get that working on the technical side, then maybe, we can do something where we can send a, yeah.
Excuse me, your mic.
Again, I'll thank you again on the record for all the work that you've done, Diane, and for the Nevada Preservation Foundation and its ongoing continuing work to do that with the Home and History Tour stands out as one of the things, but I know there are lots of other things. You have a new director, and so things are moving forward on positively in a lot of areas for historic preservation within the city, so great, thank you.
Thank you. And I do have, I think, one more thing. Thank you very much.
yeah.
And I do have to give the credit to Christopher. He's been just absolutely phenomenal to work with on this. And then just the last one, Chairman Stodel's the only one who's expressed interest in being in the parade. So just time's running short, so if anybody is willing to participate, please let us know. And that's all I have if there's questions on anything.
One other thing I may mention at the March meeting, two things. At the March meeting of the Nevada State Board of Museums and History, they're also going to be discussing the document that survey we approved on the Latinos in Nevada.
Correct, yeah.
Which has turned into a pretty controversial report. Members of the State Museum Board said there are major mistakes and pieces of the Hispanic history that are important that are not included. I don't know what that, if they're going to make all the changes they want at the March meeting. The second point is that meeting is a Zoom meeting, and it is available, and they post the agenda and backup material. And I was hoping that maybe you or Therese could send out a link so we could take a look at that when it comes up. I don't know where else to get it.
Yeah, I've never seen them do a Zoom meeting, so that's great news. I usually just call in, so. But what they do, they'll send me a sheet with the agenda on it.
Okay.
And then we can forward that to the commission.
Great, thank you. Agenda item 11, which is 25-007-HPC1. This is a report by the Community Development Department regarding historical stories in the local media, newspapers, and television. The story links include several key projects, including another motel that was once part of the Project Enchilada. That was the Lucky Hotel that caught on fire. The neon sign is still pretty much intact. There's also a story about the Huntridge House that the HPC funded the plaque. The story in the newspaper that it was put on the city register through the work of the Las Vegas City Council, noting that HPC was not mentioned. If you see a story regarding a Southern Nevada historical or archaeological resource, please send it to Dr. Seabrand or the link. There's some really good information in there, and that directly focuses on responsibilities that we have, despite the fact I'm sure everybody reads everything and sees everything. Any questions, comments? This is just an information item. Agenda item 12, future agenda items for the City of Las Vegas Historic Preservation Commission. Comments made during this portion of the agenda by individual members of the commission shall refer solely to proposals for future agenda items, and any discussion shall be limited to whether or not such proposed items are within the purview of the Historic Preservation Commission, and or whether such proposed items shall be placed on a future agenda. No discussion regarding the substance of any such proposed topic shall occur, and no action shall be taken. Does any commissioner want to propose an item for a future agenda? Seeing and hearing none, the final public comment period. Will you have a public comment? Public comment during this portion of the agenda, of course, is limited to matters within the jurisdiction of the commission, and for the record, there are no members of the public that wish to speak. Which brings us to agenda item number 14. We are adjourned. Thank you all. A short but lots of information.